We begin with President Trump still filing lawsuits to overturn results of the 2020 election. The latest in Wisconsin, which the Democratic governor there calls an assault. And the president is also still asking supporters to donate to his election defense fund. Joining us now to discuss how Trump's final actions in office may position him for his next role is Bloomberg Opinion senior columnist Tim O'Brien. Tim obviously knows a thing or two about President Trump's MO. He wrote a biography on Trump, who then sued him for libel and later lost. And Tim, we never doubted that President Trump would make the most of his remaining weeks in office. So how do you read his various actions so far? What do you think they foreshadow?
Well, let's define what making the most means, I guess. I think for President Trump, making the most means using the powers he still has in a robust fashion around some things that are near and dear to his heart. He's clearly contemplating some sweeping pardons. There's been news reports, obviously, that he's pondered pardoning Rudolph Giuliani and his own children. There's a debate about whether or not he will pardon himself. He still has an ability to issue executive orders, particularly around federal regulations affecting the environment and immigration. I think those are two categories that are likely to see action from him. And then there's a big debate about whether or not he'll even stay in Washington towards the end of the month as we get closer to Joe Biden's inauguration.
Yeah, you and I were talking earlier about how he may go down to Mar-a-Lago at Christmas and just never come back to Washington because he doesn't want to attend the inauguration.
Well, the things we're seeing right now in terms of the fraud allegations that he continues to make even today about the election is driven by a number of factors. I think first and foremost, he doesn't like being perceived as a loser. He knows that slandering the election is useful for his political base. He's concerned about the legal and financial challenges, I think, that will confront him when he leaves the White House. And as we've now learned, calling the election fraudulent is actually a money-making opportunity for Trump. He has raised a lot of political donations on the heels of claiming that he was unfairly treated in the election.
Right, ostensibly to go towards the recount, but actually it's going to perhaps set him up for his next job. And what do we think that next job is going to be? What are his options right now?
Well, I think, politically, he's publicly spoken about the idea of running again in 2024, and he will remain a kingmaker, I think, for some time within the Republican Party, at least the far right wing of the Republican Party. I think he's very interested in starting a media company from scratch or acquiring an existing media company. All of those things are going to be informed and complicated by some of the financial challenges he's facing in his own business. He's heavily indebted, and some of that debt is coming due soon. And he also has legal challenges in New York. If he ends up being charged with a crime, he's not going to be able to run for president again. Yeah. And that could affect his wherewithal in the media industry, too. So
that goes back to the idea of him issuing preemptive pardons, perhaps for his family members, perhaps for his son-in-law, perhaps for himself. I read that Jared Kushner was put in charge of leading a White House team on recommending pardons, which would create some strange optics if he were to recommend that Ivanka himself or Ivanka's brothers get pardoned. We know President Trump cares a lot about optics. Wouldn't this be the ultimate bad optics situation?
I don't think these are the kind of optics he cares about. I think you can understand most of what the president does through two prisms, either self-aggrandizement or self-preservation. The issue of pardons are clearly in the self-preservation category. The irony with Jared Kushner having any role in a pardoning process is the president is also reportedly considering pardoning Jared. The thing we don't know, and what's interesting to me about this issue of pardons, is Trump and his three eldest children and Jared Kushner have never publicly stated or been found publicly guilty of a crime. And what is the president worried about that the public doesn't know that's causing him to consider preemptive pardon? Secondly, it's very dubious as to whether or not it's even constitutional or legal for him to do either of those things.
Yes, lots of questions as a result. I do want to get your take also on a stimulus plan, because Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are now backing the bipartisan plan. And President Trump could play a role here. Certainly, he could appeal to his base if he does want to run for office again in 2024. Do you think he's going to engage when it comes to doing anything on stimulus?
Well, I think he certainly will through Steve Mnuchin. Right before the election, Trump had flip-flopped a lot on what he wanted out of a bailout plan, but he was tilting more towards the side of a bigger and more robust plan. The Republicans have come up to 908 from 400 and some change. The Democrats originally wanted over $2 trillion. I think what you're going to see as McConnell and Pelosi hash this out is a final number that everyone can agree with, that's going to certainly be smaller than what the Democrats wanted, maybe slightly larger than what the Republicans want. And where the rubber really meets the road is, what do they spend it on? Yeah. How will workers, businesses, and local government get supported?
It's always in the details, isn't it? Tim O'Brien of Bloomberg Opinion, thank you so much for joining us, as always.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quick Take now for insight in an instant.